My name's Tom Richardson. I'm a director of a company called Celsius International. And just to give you a little bit of background, I've been around in the direct marketing and in particular the database aspects of direct marketing in the UK for more years than I really care to think about. A long time ago I ran what was then the UK's largest prospect business-to-business database, and for about 10 years in the late 80s and 90s I ran a software house which I think could reasonably claim at the time to be the country's leading supplier of Salesforce automation software. These days I'm managing director of Celsius, and we offer a variety of data services in the area of the construction of databases, teleservices, campaign fulfillment, database management and intelligence. Critically, we only operate on a multi-country basis, and most of what we do is European-wide. Most of what we do is in the high-tech sector, not really from choice. It's simply that we are looking for companies who are operating and prepared to make decisions on a multi-country basis. And we find more of those in the high-tech sector than anyone else. So we deal with people like Cisco and SAP, but also with others like BMW and the tire manufacturer Continental Argay. Our ultimate parent company for about the last 2 years is WPP PLC, which I think many of you will recognize as the world's largest marketing services provider. So that's a little bit of background about me and about the company. What I'd really like to talk about, however, is the area of penetration analysis, modeling, and what it looks like, what Europe looks like at the top end of the market. I think many of you will be familiar with traditional penetration analysis, where one analyzes one's customers against a universe. First of all, we try and work out how big that potential universe is. How does it break down? Typically by cell into employee size times either some kind of business activity measurement, perhaps NACE code, perhaps UK SIC, US SIC, to work out what the market actually looks like by business activity and by number of employees. And then we analyze that customer base against that cell definition. So we try to say, how many customers have I got, for example, in textiles, in the employee size between 50 and 100. Maybe I've got 20. The total potential in that segment is 200. So my penetration is to date 10%. Is that an attractive penetration, or is that low compared to other cells? If so, I might want to target more companies within those cells, or I might want to find that there are other cells that are more attractive. I may also want to look at something like what is my sales by each cell. So how much revenue per employee am I getting from textile companies to 50 to 100? Does that mean that I've got customers who are underperforming, overperforming, or I'm getting all the revenue I can expect from them? So we might get something like this. This is just an example. I hope that's reasonably visible. I'm not going to give you a great deal of detail on it. So in this case, I'm looking at a market in Switzerland. This is something we did for a company called Nearpost, which is the world's second largest manufacturer of franking machines. And what we did was to calculate the penetration to date. So you'll see, if you can see on the top line, that in financial and insurance activities in Switzerland, they've already penetrated 49% of the market, which means there are 417 companies left to go at. Well, what they provide is obviously particularly attractive to companies of that type. So maybe there's good potential in the other 417 that are available, and maybe that applies to other cells within the marketplace. So as far as Nearpost is concerned, we put together a marketing campaign aimed at the segments that you can see on the right-hand side. And something else we might look at in penetration analysis would be some kind of thing that says, what's our average sales per cell? So, for example, in basic metals, 10 to 49, we're selling revenue, or the revenue we're getting averages out at just under €2,000 per company, per employee within that company. So if I've got a company that's only doing €500, then I should have more potential. It's worth working further on that particular business. Problem is that kind of analysis, which has worked perfectly well for, and still does for a large number of companies, tends to break down when you get to the top end of the market. If we look at what the universe looks like for just a selection of countries, in fact you can see they're just in alphabetical order. So what does the universe look like in countries like Finland and Greece and Italy? That's a breakdown from a statistical database which we maintain across Europe for all the major countries. And what I want you to highlight there is the problem of small numbers. Because you'll see, for example, if we look at Hungary, we've only got 46 companies with more than 1,000 employees. So to know that we've penetrated 2 of them within the telecommunications sector, and that there are only 3 in total, doesn't actually tell us a great deal from a statistical point of view. Even in Germany, where we've got something like 2,000 companies, over 1,000 employees, it's very difficult to use that sort of information to look at penetration in that sort of traditional statistical way. And yet, we've got sales and marketing directors or managers responsible for enterprise accounts or for public sector or for major accounts, whatever you like to call it, who want really to target that area. That's the area that's most important to them. And how do they do it? How do you most optimally assign account managers to the right account? How do you choose the right accounts to go for when it comes to marketing services? Because this sector is big, it's expensive to penetrate, and you've got to make choices. So very often, we end up with a simple request like that. Get me a list of Europe's top 20,000 companies. Problem is, even that is nothing like as simple as one might think from just asking it. Let me give you an example or two. Let's take what the Financial Times thinks is the top, in this case, 20 companies in Europe. After all, they're the Financial Times. They should know, shouldn't they? That's what the list is. That's what the Financial Times says is the top 20 companies in Europe. It's by market capitalization, which probably doesn't help us a great deal from as a starting point when we're looking at marketing. And if we examine it in a bit more detail, it actually gets worse. I mean, if we are selling cars or computer tablets or something like that, what you'll see is that Siemens, which is actually way down at number 16 on the list, has 400,000 employees, whereas Royal Dutch Shell, which is number 1, has less than 100,000. If I were to sell tablets, I'm looking at numbers of people. And Siemens, prima facie, seems to have more chance than I have with Royal Dutch Shell. And we look at some others. Gazprom's got 400,000 employees, but they're all in Russia. And am I targeting Russia? Anheuser-Busch InBev is another very large and is just about a European company because its head office is in Belgium, but most of its employees aren't anywhere near Europe. They're in the States, they're in South America, and they're all around the world. So if I'm targeting Europe, that's not a very helpful statistic. And there are two companies, or two just of the obvious companies, that even aren't on the list at all. Volkswagen's got 500,000 employees. Doesn't appear. G4S, very famous, or let's say notorious in the UK as a result of the Olympics, actually employs 600,000 people. But the Financial Times doesn't regard it as one of the top 20 the top 20 companies. If we look at the list by revenue, we'll be targeting the oil companies. And maybe we don't want to do that. And look at HSBC, which the FT has as the third largest corporation, wouldn't actually appear on the list at all if you were looking at it by turnover, because banks and insurers and people like that don't have turnover, don't have revenue in the conventional sense. So what I've done here is to go back to the Financial Times top 1,000 list, but now I've selected the top 20 by employee size. And you'll notice that only 3 of our people that were in the top 20 before are even on that list at all. G4S is now at the top. Lots of potential, 600,000 people. But unless you're selling security uniforms or mops and buckets, frankly, that's not going to help you a great deal either. Randstad, I don't know how even familiar that is in the UK, never mind the fact that it employs 600,000 people. It's actually the largest Dutch employment agency. It doesn't really employ 600,000 people. It employs them on behalf of others. And its own buying power is probably only the equivalent of 20,000 employees. So that's another one which we should probably be forgetting. The point I'm really making is, does it really reflect the potential for your business? Our suggestion is that what really matters is the purchasing power. What we're looking for is the top companies in Europe by purchasing power related to our particular business. And what we need is statistics that will potentially provide that. Now, that's a problem that various of our customers have come to over the last 10 years or so. And we have built, over that 10 years, a detailed model which really shows where that potential really is. And in our experience, most models of purchasing power rely on these sort of statistics. How many employees they've got, what does the company do, who owns it, and in what way. Now, one can expand on that. So, how many employees has it got? How many are within our target country? How many perhaps are deployed across a whole region, Europe or EMEA? How many does this particular institution control on a global business, on a global basis? What business activity are they in? Typically because a lot of our customers are American, by US SIC code or by European NACE code, or grouped up by industry and vertical. Who's their parent company? Who actually controls them? Who do you potentially have to go to get a decision? Is what you're selling something that's Europe-wide or global-wide? Is it therefore worth talking to the local subsidiaries? And is what you're selling targeted at the public sector, at private companies, at non-profit maybe? Are you interested in subsidiaries? Are you only interested in parents? And what we do is to look at the market in those terms. So what does Europe actually look like as far as this kind of model is concerned? If we take all the major countries of Western Europe, Central Europe, including Russia, or Eastern Europe if you like, including Russia, and one or two of the more significant countries of the Middle East, and if we take all organizations, commercial, non-profit, public sector, then Europe, or Greater Europe, or EMEA if you like, looks like 41,000 organizations, of which 8,000 are public sector and non-profit, so leaving about 33,000 in the commercial sector. Just bearing in mind that what we're doing here is to create a model of what the market looked like. We're not trying to create, and we're not trying to explain to you about a database. We're talking about a planning model. Just statistically, that's probably not very visible. Of the total, about 30,000 of those companies are in Western Europe. Approximately 10,000 are in Eastern Europe, and the other 2,000 are in the Middle East, Africa, including Israel and South Africa. So that's where the market is. 10,000 are in Central Europe, but half of those are in Russia. So that just gives you some guidance. Even today, Eastern Europe is certainly not where the real potential is. The big numbers are all in Western Europe still. And if we take simply excluding the public sector, then it drops to approximately 32,000 organizations. How do we use that kind of information? I'd like to show you a more complex version, but we have customers who wouldn't be very happy if we did. But if we take a simple sales deployment model, then those of you who are actually from the IT sector might recognize that I'm using what in that business is known as the RAD model, retention, acquisition, development, but I've just divided it into high buying power, medium buying power, and low buying power organizations. And what I've got in this case is I'm talking about a company that has 20 salespeople deployed across the major account spectrum. And currently, that company has a total of 483 customers. That's the 69, the 133, and the 281 that you can see on the right-hand side of the screen. And we've got about 30,000 organizations which are regarded as potential targets, of which the company has already done some work and identified there are 14,000 which for one reason or another, in terms of buying power or location or ownership, are actually worthwhile from the company's point of view. And I want to deploy those 20 salespeople where they'll do most good. So you can see where I'm deploying them in this model. It's the blue block marked yes. And the result shows me that the model is going to assign something like 300 accounts per major account salesman, of which on average only about 23 of 24 are customers. Frankly, that's just far too many. There is no way that the major accounts guy can possibly attack, however he's operating, as many as 309 accounts, and he's certainly going to go nowhere near the 206 that are prospects and are only medium buying power. So we might build a model on that basis and then cut the assignment. So let's cut out the assignment to the medium buying power prospects and see how many we've now got. So the model's now telling us we've got 100 per man, we've got 103 per man, but 78 are still prospects. It's still far too many. So what we probably need to do is to cut that number in the middle of the screen at that 1,567, which we're saying are attractive prospects. We've got to be a bit more ruthless about it. So let's cut that. I've now cut it to a 703. I've said, right, we're going to be more ruthless in our selections. Now what does it look like? Now we've reduced it to 59 per man, of which 35 are prospects. And if we're in a fast-growing market, it's perfectly possible that that's a viable type of selection. But in more slow growth markets, we might need to take that further down and cut our attractive index, if you like, at a lower level. And in this case, we've got the number of accounts per man down to 36, which for a lot of companies is going to be a far more realistic level to actually target. But what about the ones outside that? What about the ones that we might want to target from a marketing standpoint? So we might then use some kind of market weighting model against those statistics, so we can take the ones that are high buying power, and just for the sake of argument in this case, I've assigned them a weighting of 60 as compared to the low ones with a weighting of 10. I've also said that I think quoted companies and private corporations are, in this case, 12 times more attractive to us than the public sector. So I've assigned a weighting of 60 against a weighting of 5 for the public sector. And I've tried also to model where the parent companies come into this. So in our experience, for example, Nordic-based, Scandinavian, Swedish public companies control their subsidiaries much more closely than those, say, in the UK. Decisions tend to be centralised, and for that reason, I'm going to make Nordics less attractive, excuse me, than European, particularly UK companies. So I'm simply assigning a set of weightings on the basis of the stats that are available to me, and that enables me to weight the market to take those 30,000 prospects and say, okay, there's 1,500 of them, of which 260 are in the UK, that are really attractive to me. And I might be attacking those with some combination of telemarketing, emailing, research on contacts, etc. Whereas I might be saying, well, for the 8,000 in the lower score, well, we'll do some kind of direct mailing strategy. And for the 16,000 in the under 100 score, frankly, at this case, I'm not interested in them. So it enables me to segment that European market and decide what strategies I'm going to use to target which companies within it. Basically, that's what this modelling process is about. We can take those 41,000 employees and we can work out which are the most attractive in terms of potential, and we can work out where the big white spaces are in our market. We can link it, in fact, to external databases and bring in contact information if that's what you wish to do. And we can make the data available to you on a variety of bases.